They called him a savage. They called him a ghost. They said he could vanish into the mountains like smoke and yet return again like thunder, but they did not know his name. They did not know his story. They did not understand that before he was a warrior, before he became a symbol of resistance. He was a father, a husband, a son of man who simply wanted to live free under the wide sky. His people were the Bidonko Apache, and he was born in the mountains of what is now New Mexico around the year 1829. They called him Goyakla, the one who yawns, and in his youth he was not yet feared, not yet hunted. He was a boy who laughed with cousins, who learned to ride before he could speak, who listened to the wind in the canyons and believed it carried the voices of the ancestors. He grew up in peace, or what passed for peace in those days, surrounded by elders who taught him how to hunt, how to survive, how to respect the land and the spirits that lived within it. He married young and loved deeply. He had children. He tended fields. He helped defend the band when raids came, but he was not yet the warrior the world would come to know. It was in 1858 that everything changed, a massacre by Mexican soldiers in the town of Llanos would ignite a fire that would never burn out. Goyakla was away trading when the soldiers attacked his camp. When he returned, he found the bodies of his mother, his wife, and all three of his children laid out like broken branches. He did not speak for days. He did not eat. He did not weep. He walked into the wilderness alone, and when he returned, he was no longer the same. Something had changed in his eyes. Something fierce, something infinite. They say he heard a voice in the desert that told him no bullet could kill him, that his enemies would fall before him like grass in the wind, and whether it was madness, grief, or something greater, he believed it, and so did those who followed him. They called him Geronimo, a name born in battle, a name shouted in fear and awe. And from that moment, he would lead his people through decades of resistance, through blood and betrayal. And into the heart of history, Geronimo became the leader of breakaway bands of Apache warriors who refused to be forced onto reservations, who refused to watch their children starve under government rations, who refused to forget the songs of their ancestors while the United States and Mexico hunted him with armies while newspapers branded him a criminal while politicians called him a menace. He moved like wind through the mountains, striking and vanishing again, feeding his people with hunted game, praying to the spirits before battle, sleeping beneath the stars without walls or fences. He led raids to recover stolen horses, to rescue imprisoned kin, to remind the world that the Apache still walked the earth. He was pursued by thousands of soldiers, tracked by scouts, betrayed by treaties that were written one day and broken the next, and still he would not yield in 1876 when the U.S. government ordered the Chiricahua Apache onto the San Carlos Reservation, known as Hell's 40 Acres, for its dry soil and disease ridden waters. Geronimo agreed reluctantly, but what he saw there broke him. Starving families, corrupt agents, death in every direction. So he fled again into the mountains, and the chase began again for 10 years. Geronimo was a ghost slipping through canyons, surviving ambushes and winters and the slow loss of his people, who grew weary, who died, who were captured, and yet he fought not for glory, not for conquest, but for something older than any empire. He fought for the right to live on his land, to speak his language, to raise his children. In freedom in 1886, he was 70 years old, and still he rode like a young man still. He outwitted his pursuers, still he carried The hopes of the people on his shoulders, but the world had changed. The rifles were faster, the scouts more numerous, and the betrayals more precise after weeks of negotiation. With General Nelson Miles, Geronimo finally surrendered for the last time. His band of only a few dozen faced 1,000, but his surrender was not defeat. It was a warning, a promise that the spirit of resistance could never be buried. He spent the rest of his life as a prisoner of war, shipped from one fort to another, paraded at world fairs, photographed like an exhibit, yeah. Even in captivity, he remained defiant. When asked to convert to Christianity, he refused. When told to forget his language, he refused. When asked to sell his weapons to white collectors, he laughed. Them close, he lived long enough to ride in the inaugural parade of Theodore Roosevelt, to shake hands with those who once hunted him, to tell his story to those who once feared his name, and in every word he reminded them that he had not surrendered his soul. In 1909, Geronimo died of pneumonia after being thrown from his horse and lying in the cold all night alone. Even in death, he was a man of the earth, of wind and stone and silence. He was buried in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, far from his mountains, far from his people, but his spirit did not stay there. His spirit still walks in the hills where he once sang. His spirit still lives in the songs of Apache grandmothers, in the war cries of resistance in every child who learns the truth of what was stolen, and who still dares to hope. He was not perfect. He made choices that cost lives. He could be ruthless, proud, stubborn, but he was also wise, loving, devoted to his people, a man shaped by sorrow who refused to be broken by it. They called him savage, but he was defending his home. They called him outlaw, but he was living his law. They called him a ghost, but he was more alive than those who tried to silence him, and in the end it was not the gun that made Geronimo a legend. It was the fire in his heart, the truth in his story, and the unshakable belief that no power on earth could erase a people who remembered who they were. Asterisk.